Okay, guys, it's 4 o'clock. I think we can start with our session. I'm very happy that we can do this. It's the second activity we organize with We're Smart Academy. And yeah, the debate is about fermentation in gastronomy, and where we come from and where we think we can go with this technique, culinary technique. I will first do a round and that you all say something about who you are and what is your connection with this item, fermentation. So Sylvie, you have the honor to start.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm Sylvie Ron. I am French. I live in Luxembourg, and I am a doctor in microbiology. So I have studied for nearly all my studies lactic acid bacteria, mainly in alcoholic fermentation, so in wine. And then I did my PhD in whiskey fermentation.
Okay.
And then I worked in a DNA sequencing company. And then I did something completely different, but then I'm passionate with bacteria. So I started to cook with, well, to prepare food with them. And I tried a lot raw food and things like that. So my laboratory is in my kitchen. And that's how we met with René, and we exchange, and I always follow science about this bacteria, and the gastronomy part is very interesting for me to follow.
Okay.
So it's the science part.
René?
Au Luxembourg aussi. Donc, on a travaillé déjà avec aussi Sylvie sur pas mal de choses, sur la fermentation, puis on a fait pas mal de ça par rapport à également. Donc, je crois bien que les autres personnes aussi doivent certainement être, s'ils sont là, c'est qu'ils ont des choses à dire. Donc, moi, je m'exprime en français. Mario va traduire. Voilà, à toi, Mario.
So he is Mathieu, the chef of the restaurant in the distillery in Luxembourg, in Brooklyn. He knows a lot. My name is Mario Willems. I'm René's associate in a company that we have together. And I will translate René's French texts.
Okay, Sylvester.
So my name is Sylvester. I'm working at Basel, Hofke van Basel. It's a restaurant near Antwerp, actually the other side of the water. It's East Flanders already. I'm sous chef already for a couple of years, already more than 12 years over here. And my part in the part being sous chef is also our vegetable garden. And considering that, I also did the studies of herborist. So my focus is really on healthy food, what food does into your body, and fermentation. It's a big part of it. Started already a couple of years ago. I also want to learn a lot about it. And when there are techniques or things I don't know, I go deeper into it. And I even did some workshops at L'Air du Temps with Sam Hoon over there when he was showing his kimchi. So really looking forward to this meeting also.
Okay, thank you. Sam?
Hello, I'm Sangoum de Jambre. I'm the chef and owner of Restaurant L'Air du Temps. We opened the restaurant 23 years ago, and my focus was at the beginning techniques, because I'm former sommelier, and I cooked for the first time when I opened my restaurant 22 23 years ago. And from this point, I wanted to know exactly what is cuisine. And that's why at the beginning, I focused on chemistry and physical. And that's why today we create our garden probably 18 years ago, and we start to use fermentation 11 years ago for the first time. And now we start to ferment everything from oyster to scallops, and we start to meat. We do our sausage, charcuterie, cheeses. We do everything in fermentation.
We will talk about this later some, because it's very interesting what you are saying. We go in detail afterwards. So Aaron.
Hey, my name is Aaron Adams. From Portland, Oregon, USA. I have Farm Spirit is my restaurant I'm the chef and owner of. We also have Fermenter. And Fermenter and Farm Spirit have a big focus on fermentation, where we produce, from scratch, we make tempeh, koji, lactic acid bacteria fermentation, kombucha, kefir, ginger beer, hazelnut-based cultured cheeses, and vinegar. I mean, we make everything. And I'm just a person that's been obsessed with fermentation and the process for I don't know how long, since I started cooking 20 some years ago.
Okay, perfect. We will start with the questions. So Sylvie, what is fermentation for you? You said already that you had you tried a lot of things in your kitchen. So what is it for you?
So for me, it's in this context, it's really the way bacteria uses substrate to generate energy to survive. This is the basic science thing. In fact, you have lactic acid fermentation, and you have acetic acid fermentation, you have alcoholic fermentation. So you have a different kind of fermentation depending on the environment where the bacteria is. So here we speak of more lactic acid and acetic acid fermentation. So it's the way bacteria that are in our environment will react when they are put in a certain context. I mean, when you do lactofermentation, you put water and salt. And the salt will guide the population to develop in a certain way. And fermentation for me is like an ecosystem, because whatever you ferment, depending on the place you live and the person you are, you will influence what will develop. Okay. So that's my definition on fermentation.
Okay, and what are the assets for health? Because is every sort of fermentation good for health?
Since humans have been knowing these assets of fermentation. Sorry, I have some. Okay. The fermentation have allowed humans to survive through time. The people that found out the benefits of fermented product were had more vitamins, energy, and so the main assets is that first of all, it's preservation of food for our health, because it's antiseptic, because the lactic acid bacteria produces bacteriocins that kills pathogenic bacteria like Salmonella, Escherichia coli, and for example also Clostridium botulinum for the botulinism. You know, when people are doing preserves like with heat for vegetables, you had a lot of contamination with this bacteria, Clostridium botulinum, botulinism. And the fact to fermentate with lacto fermentation, the lactic acid bacteria will annihilate the development of the spores that make people sick. So for me, as a microbiologist, the first asset is preservation of health.
Okay.
And you have the second part is it enhances the nutritional composition of the food. It's well known that you have more vitamin C in fermented cabbage than initially. So it enhances the nutritional composition of a raw food, in fact, from the beginning.
But what we have is sometimes that the taste of a product is changing, no?
Okay, fermentation, you cannot expect with a fermentation to have the same taste of the product as originally, because it's a way to preserve it. So for me, it's an expression. It's like between the plant and an essential oil, you extract and express something. You cannot have the whole thing. And fermentation is kind of the same idea. You take a raw material, you put it in certain conditions, and you have a result. So for me, you cannot expect to have the same, you have, of course, same aromas, but they will be influenced by the change of pH, for example, of a medium. So it will change the taste, definitely.
Okay. Can we eat too much fermented food?
Yes, because you have people that have, for example, it's called IBS. It's the irritable bowel syndrome. It's when they bloat a lot and they have gases. And when a lot of people have this, in fact, in the world. And when you eat a lot of fermented foods on an organism where there are already too many bacteria, it can degrade more your health. So fermented foods are healthy, but not to eat too much of them. And it depends on which state of health you are. Okay. It is said that it can improve your health, but you need to be very careful of the dose you take and when you take it and what kind of, because kefir, for example, on people that are very sensitive with their gut, they feel it immediately, they bloat.
So it's a problem for health, or it's only not nice to have it, or?
No, it's a problem, because when you have too many, we are more bacterial than human in number of cells. That is very important to know for health. We are 10 times more bacterial and viral than human cells. So in fact, when you eat fermented food, it's like you bring bacteria that can participate to your own microflora, but you have your own identity microflora. And if it's disbalanced, then you have problems. And if you ferment too much, if, for example, your liver is getting fat and you put on weight and you have a health problem. So too much fermentation is not good for our health.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for the explanation. So San, we heard that there are different sorts of fermentation. Do you use them all in the kitchen, or you are focused on one of them?
Yes, we tried so many fermentation, but indeed we are focused on lactic fermentation because the first sample is the kimchi. I studied the kimchi 11 years ago, and from this point, because of our garden, we started to ferment in lactic fermentation mainly. It's our focus at the moment, yes. Okay. And for me, lactic fermentation is a real nice way to preserve vegetables and to give, to enhance the flavor and to give more attractiveness. And yes, and we are focused on this. And with this fermentation, we have so many possibilities to preserve, but we can use today, we start to use fermentation in different way. I mean, for example, if I use kimchi, I use the juice of kimchi, I use kimchi too, but when I pretty finish the pot, I just dehydrate the kimchi to have a perfect balance salt.
Okay.
You have a kind of salt, really tasty, lightly acidic, and I use to season my food.
Yeah.
But I use it to have a kind of broth. You can put this kind of powder from kimchi. You put in a kind of coffee pot, like Italian bialetti, and you warm it and you have a kind of minute soup. And with this minute soup, you can make a sauce for a dish and really tasty, a lot of umami. And it's sort of a way to explain that we start to with innovation to don't have waste, and we use the waste to create new things. It's really, really interesting because I use this powder to make bread, to make, to season new things. And it's, when I just focus on lactic fermentation, there are so many ways to use it. And it's really interesting.
But,
and maybe after lactic fermentation, I will focus on another fermentation, but I think I have for all of my life to study this topic.
You have a fantastic garden, I think 5 hectares altogether, with 7 people who are working in the garden every day. So it's a lot of work to see that everything is going well and to take it to the kitchen. But who is doing the fermentation? Is it the guys from the garden, or are the chefs in the kitchen?
Depend of the season, because at the end of the season, gardener have less work than at the beginning.
Okay.
And they start to ferment for winter. But during the year, it's all the chefs make fermentation, because they need, it's necessary for us to understand the techniques and use these techniques every day. And gardener or chef, everybody in the restaurant do fermentation.
And they know it all, how to do it?
Yes, because more than a receipt, more than a recipe, for me, it's really important to explain why it works. And it's the first lesson when they start to work in the restaurant.
Okay, perfect. So, Aaron, yeah, we know that you have 2 restaurants in Oregon, in Portland, and one of them is plant-based. Both are plant-based, but one is a restaurant, plant-based restaurant, normal, and then you have the restaurant who is really specialized on the fermentation. So you explain.
Called fermenter. So yeah, it's.
Explain us how it's working.
Huh?
Explain us how you are organized in your restaurants.
So it's a kind of a funny story. Fermenter is a very small, like, deli, and Farm Spirit is our sit down course meal restaurant. And how Farm Spirit used to be in the location where Fermenter is.
Mm-hmm.
And when we moved it around the corner to this new spot, we kept the old location. We used it as like a laboratory for doing experimentation and for doing our fermentation projects and baking projects. And the landlord actually got upset at us because he said, "You have the storefront, you need to be open to the public." So I said, okay. So we put some seats in front and we said it's a restaurant now. But then, and for me, it was kind of more of a joke, but so we called it Fermenter, like whatever. And but then it got popular. So then we had to actually do something. It started off with Fermenter being basically a support for creating things for the degustation menu over at Farm Spirit. But now it's kind of taking center focus now, because with COVID-19 and with the situation over here in Oregon, having a restaurant that does has a focus more on takeaway has been taking all of our focus. So now we've shifted and are really focusing on that aspect.
Okay, and the Americans have no problem with this new technique?
Well, I mean, like, America is big, right? So, you know, Portland, Oregon is its own region. You know, like Oregon is its own region, and then Portland, very specifically, has a population that is very open-minded to these types of foods. Like, you know, so we are definitely producing what our customers want, and you know, Portland has a huge focus on health, and there's a perception that fermentation is associated with, you know, fermented foods are associated with health. I agree with what Sylvie said, that that's not like, it's definitely not a panacea or anything, but it's definitely should be part of our diets in moderation, like everything else. And so we're happy to be able to provide some things that might not be accessible to people who eat a plant-based diet.
And do you have in every dish that you create in the restaurant something fermented, or it's
yeah, and I don't think that's too unusual. I mean, like, because that could be like a vinegar, you know, or it could be, the protein is like, will be tempeh or something that is to do with koji or something like that. So I don't think it's too unusual. It's not like we don't design a plate and say like, okay, we need to have, you know, a sauerkraut and a kimchi, and then, you know, like, we don't go crazy like that. But, you know, there is going to be an element of fermentation. But I think that's pretty typical with almost all food now. I mean, like, if you think about it, there's going to be cheese or salami or vinegar, or, you know, fermentation is everywhere. Chocolate, coffee, that's all fermentation.
That's true. Yeah, for a lot of people that didn't think about it, and now, because we are seeing that there is a lot of creativity with fermentation, so we see that,
yeah,
like you said,
I mean, and that's
a
where
lot of things are fermented.
That's where I think what we're trying to do is, we're, you know, like, to your question about like, does it fit an American taste? I think the thing that what we're trying to do is, like, we'll take something like a hamburger, right, which is a very American, right? So that, and we say, how are we gonna, you know, well, obviously the bread is, you know, we use a sourdough bun. That's obviously a result of fermentation. But then, you know, because we're a plant-based restaurant, the way that we do it is that we take, like, for example, for our hamburger, we call it a fermenter burger, is millet and lentils that are made into a tempeh in the shape of a patty. And then we sear it off, and it's marinated and glazed in a shiokoji. So it's that we make a smoked onion shiokoji that we glaze the hamburger in, and the umami is off the charts. And it's just this beautiful, savory, wonderful hamburger that when you eat, you feel good. Doesn't feel heavy, but it's something relatable to people. So our menu is diverse in that way, where we have things that are really accessible, and we use you know, old, you know, our focus isn't so sciencey as craft. And so then we use lots of craft methods to do these fermentation, these things that people have been making for, you know, 1,000 plus, you know, thousands of years, and really trying to offer them in a way that's digestible for people in like in this modern time.
Okay, and like a lot of restaurants, I think you have also done the last months some takeaway. In this takeaway, you have a lot of fermented food that is bought, and people coming from that.
Yes.
Really only a cup of fermented whatever.
Well, we sell, you know, like, we have our ready to eat menu of like all these things that have fermentation involved, you know. And fermentation, I'm using it in a really broad, like, more of a culinary sense, because it's obviously not everything we're talking about is glycolysis, and, you know, it's like, we're talking about, you know, when I'm saying fermentation, I mean tempeh and koji too, which is not it's not lactic acid bacteria fermentation, right? But it's so like, yeah, everything on our menu will have some sort of form of culturing or fermentation on it. And then besides that, we also have our deli case, which we have filled with like sauerkraut, kimchi, seaweed kraut, et cetera, and then our cheeses. We make a Kefir based cheese out of hazelnuts. And I should note too that the one thing that I feel really good about with Farm Spirit and Fermenter is that our restaurants have a huge focus on local. So we don't use, even though we're a vegan restaurant, we don't use tropical nuts. We don't use anything from abroad. Everything from our oil to our produce, fruits, vegetables, grains, everything are all coming within about 100 miles of the restaurant. So it's a particular challenge to do vegan and do super local, but with having fermentation part of it, it really expands everything, because you can take a product like a mushroom and I can serve the mushroom, but I can also do a mushroom that's in koji, or I can do a lactic acid bacteria fermentation with the mushroom and make like a super funky sauce, or, you know, there's lots of things we can do.
Okay, very interesting. So thank you, Aaron. Sylvester, I know that you have a fantastic garden, and it's like a child for you. You are always busy, and to do that the garden is nice, that you have a lot of choices, that you can have the products when you need them in the restaurant. But I understand that you are also focused on drinks, fermented drinks. More and more you can see that in the restaurants, that you can make the choice about non-alcoholic and alcoholic drinks. And explain us a little bit what you are doing with this.
Yes. First of all, it actually started already a long time ago with non-alcoholic drinks. We give a lot of alternatives into the restaurant. But during my course of herborist, I also learned a lot about food. It's more than actually food. It's considering health. And as Sylvie already said, a lot of vitamins, a lot of minerals into our food, they just go away while we are preparing food. I think fermentating is a really good way to keep all the vitamins and everything we need into the food, and for sure into drinks. It's helps stimulates our stomach. The natural bacteria, we actually add bacteria to our body. And I think the big problem where it all starts is that we eat, first of all, too healthy food, because it looks nice into a shop, but it's full of antibiotics, and it's full of products that don't need to be inside the food. And before fermentating, it all starts with choosing the good product. If you're gonna use a product where we already had additives from antibiotica or not biological limes, things like that, we just add it into our drinks. And the goal is actually to have the symbiose into our body with the good bacteria and not the antibiotic. So that's why we try to use a lot of, first of all, kombucha is very important into our kitchen. We first started, of course, as a drink for ourselves. Then we slowly added into the restaurant with serving our customers with a nice dish. But it goes further, because also kombucha you can use as marination for even a piece of nice fish. When you have a nice piece of greasy fish, you can marinate the fish inside while the fish tastes nice. It also makes a little bit nice, more the structure. The fibers, they're gonna go more soft, like for example, a mackerel, and they get really soft when you put them like for 2 hours in a nice kombucha. And you can add it also as a vinaigrette, combined even with making your own vinegar. So that's actually a big part of the kitchen, is serving the kombucha into drinks or into preparations. Otherwise, when you learn about kombucha, you want to see if there's even more. So you start with kefir. Kefir is actually one of the first thing we already tried, because it's the easiest one. Everybody can make it, actually, an easy water kefir. But we start making our yogurt of ourselves, because it's, first of all, it's much cheaper when you have a farmer over here that gives you the fresh milk. You add the water kefir, the milk kefir. You're gonna have some nice yogurts of your own. We make our own cheeses. We made, for also the contest, we made a vegan cheese with some fermented almonds. Also using the water kefir to give it a nice extra taste into the cheese. So about the drinks, it's actually very important in our kitchen. But the fact is that we have to think that we didn't invented it, because it already exists for such a long time. I think there was a couple of years ago that the hype started of fermentation, and now we are reinventing the fermentation, because like the black tea is a fermented tea leaf, so it consists for thousands of years. So but I think the thing we are doing now is a nice way to promote again the fermentation, and to really think about the healthiness of our body, and what we have to eat, just, or to drink, of course, just to be healthy. Of course, a glass of wine, everybody loves it, but too much alcohol, it's not good. So there are alternatives, even the same. But if you can have the nice combination of both, I think you can have a lot of healthier life, and you can have a healthier way of being, a healthier way of cooking, and that's what our focus is about.
Okay, and in all the mixes you have already made, all the drinks you have made, which one is the one who has the most success in the restaurant?
Yes, there are two things that really I really like. Is first of all elderflower, not only the flower, also the berries, because it's so much flavor, so much floral. And then I have like a particular herb into my garden that really goes all to my love to, and it's the wood calamint. It's a kind of mint, but more yeah, how can I say, more intense, but not mint. It's like a touch of mint, a touch of thyme. It's like a kind of eau de cologne flavor. When you smell eau de cologne, you smell a lot of flavors. So when you use the flowers of the wood calamint, it's really like an explosion of all floral flavors and senses. So that is combined with kombucha and then the water kefir. Those are my two particular herbs I love the most.
And how many people are taking this choice when you have the possibility in the restaurant? How many people are taking it?
Yeah, more and more. If we saw a couple of years ago, it was like everybody took adapted wines, and now everybody is actually, first of all, we are, as you know, a best vegetable restaurant, so we have a lot of customers vegetarian. I think if we have 60-70 persons a week completely vegetarian, it's a lot. So they are really open to it. They are really open to know a new kind of flavor, new kind of taste. So I think more or less 20% of people would like to have adapted juices. It's not all fermented, it's not all kefir, but they start with the kombucha. They can have there's like an aperitif with the water kefir. But I also like the combination of, because you can have a second yeast on the bottle, then they go to sparkling. But if you just leave the kombucha open air, it's a non-sparkling. So the combination of both is actually also a little bit nice, because too much sparkling, it's, for me personally, I don't like it. So I like it a little bit more still. So we serve a lot of options into the restaurant considering that.
And the last question, for people who are drinking this for the first time, what do you have sometimes reactions to say, whoa, what is this?
Yeah, it's not really for somebody who don't know kombucha. And if you are into fermented, you learn to appreciate the flavor a little bit more easy. It's the same, I think, with kimchi. It's the same, I think, with everything of fermented. It has this particular taste. So we do with wines. We let them taste. We also do with the kombucha. So before we have the nice bottles, we serve them a little bit, and we really like them to be open for it. If they don't like it, it's not a problem. It's not for everybody the taste. You have to learn to appreciate those juices and those things. Sure. It's with everything.
Thank you, Sylvester.
With pleasure.
So René, you are a chef who goes wild, what means that you are close to nature. We know that you go always around Chateau Bourg-Leinster for taking a lot of ingredients, natural ingredients. So what is for you important when you use those products, and how you use them in your kitchen when you are fermenting?
Comment on utilise l'utilisation? On essaie déjà de regarder les ferments naturels. Il y a une certaine fleur, certaines plantes. Moi, j'aime bien travailler les oléagineux parce que justement, on arrive à faire des choses qui sont vraiment très sympas. Bon, maintenant, au niveau de la fermentation, je ne suis peut-être pas dans le même engouement que tout le monde. J'estime que la fermentation, si je me souviens du passé de ma grand-mère qui faisait aussi des fermentations.
Allô?
En été, on ne peut pas toujours tout assumer. C'était un moyen de conserver par le passé la fermentation, fermentait beaucoup. Donc j'essaie de rester dans cet esprit-là, de donner des touches de fermentation, mais je ne veux pas en abuser non plus, parce que j'estime que, en tout cas pour mon cas, si je mange par exemple trop de produits fermentés, mes intestins ne l'acceptent pas non plus. Donc j'aime bien garder ça plus pour l'hiver, parce que l'hiver, je pense qu'on a plus envie, et déjà que l'été, par exemple la période la plus chaude, on a déjà tendance à manger beaucoup de choses qui sont crues. Donc déjà au niveau des intestins, etc., voilà, ça demande déjà un travail des intestins. Donc c'est vrai qu'on peut l'aider aussi l'intestin s'il est paresseux. Bon, moi, ce n'est pas mon cas. Donc voilà, je vais laisser déjà travailler.
Oui, Mario.
Oui, voilà. Okay, so René is telling us that when he goes out and forage in the neighborhood of the castle here in Bourg-Leinster in Luxembourg, he's trying to use also products that are natural ferments that are making it easier. His view on fermentation is also not to use too much, not too often. His thing is to use it in the time when we need to conserve vegetables and greens. Some people are more sensitive to fermenting things, so when the bowels are using it more. So his bowels, for example, are very sensitive to it, so he doesn't need it as much.
Okay, I have another question, and I think for us it's a little bit confusing. When you ferment products, you can have them for a long time in house, but are there also seasons in when you cook with fermented foods? So is there something we have to look for? There are some things important that we have to know.
Dans la technique, je pense que la technique, oui, on apprend tous les jours de toute façon. Mais moi, ce que j'aime bien, c'est à certains moments bien précis. Par exemple, au printemps, on va peut-être favoriser certaines plantes comme étant en fermentation parce qu'on sait qu'elles vont venir ajouter quelque chose en plus dans les produits de l'été. Par exemple, si on prend les graines d'ail des ours, par exemple, ou des fraises blanches, par exemple, qui ne sont pas mûres, on peut fermenter, ça peut amener des petites touches comme ça. Voilà, je ne veux pas en abuser non plus parce que j'estime qu'à un moment donné, les légumes, on a des bons légumes, voilà, pour respecter déjà le goût du légume. Et parfois, la fermentation, oui, l'accentue, mais peut aussi le détruire. Enfin, moi, ça, c'est mon avis.
So René is from the point that fermenting, which ones? Well, it's a lot of fruits, it's a lot of little things, and when you ferment, it needs to bring a special taste to the dish. Depending on the season, it's important to use the fruits or the vegetables or the greens that you're going to ferment, where they bring their own little added value. Otherwise, you can use the product pure as well and natural as well, because they have a wonderful taste already.
Okay, thank you.
C'est vrai que pour l'instant,
Son,
je disais pour l'instant, on est dans une période où on a mis pas mal de choses qui sont comme ça en fermentation, ou des pickles. Pourquoi? Parce que pendant tout l'automne, l'hiver, on a moins de choses, donc ça va nous fermentation, où on va aller fermenter des légumes. Non, c'est pas mon truc.
So for the moment, he is fermenting a lot of produce because it's summer, it's been spring, and there's a lot of produce. And then we can use these fermented produces during late autumn and winter when there's less produce available by nature.
Je pense que parfois on a tendance justement.
you're out. We don't hear you.
Tout le monde n'est pas apte à manger tout le temps de la fermentation.
Yeah, you have to be careful with fermenting because not everybody is good to eat. Is good to eat a lot of fermentation.
Okay. Son,
Yes.
what is your opinion about the success of fermentation today in all the kitchens? You see it now everywhere. I think in the gastronomy, in the high-level gastronomy, you don't have a chef who is not fermenting today.
I imagine that you have some tastes who are typically modern cuisine, and some tastes are typically traditional cuisine. When you speak about tradition, you can imagine salt and sweet and sugar. And when you imagine modern, it's more bitter and acid. You can imagine it? And now at this time, when you do some modern cuisine, we try to give some freshness, some acidity, some lightness, some vegetables a little bit bitter. It's new taste. It gives more lightness when you eat. And now I think when you use fermentation, it's more a question of this is point who are really important for human being now. Nature, taking care of no waste, and all these topics are, it's a kind of summary. Fermentation is a kind of summary of that. You have acidity, it's good for your body, it's good for nature because you use less waste. I think it's a good answer for all the problems we can find with the environment. It's more, I think fermentation is sustainable, and it's a nice summary.
Yeah, I already received in a restaurant the peel of potato was fermented and it was mixed with another taste, so it gives a really nice drink. Do you do that also, using things that we normally put away and use them to ferment?
We don't have coffee in Belgium, and I create my own coffee.
Okay.
I just save all the peel of the skin of the topinambour, Jerusalem artichoke, and I just let in a vacuum bag and let it ferment for maybe 10 or 15 days. I dehydrate them, milled, and I use them as a coffee.
Okay.
And you don't need to add sugar because it's enough sweet. And you have the bitterness because I roast the skin around 150, 55. And I have a perfect taste of coffee. And it's our own coffee now.
And do you have other things like this you do with plant-based ingredients?
We do our own chocolate with fruit of, I don't know the name in English, Tiel, Linde.
Yeah.
Linde. And I create our own chocolate. And we don't have chocolate in Belgium, and we are nice craftsmen who transform chocolate. But I imagine to make chocolate with a fruit of Linde. Lightly fermented to have the acidity, and we can crush it with some sugar, and we have a perfect dessert.
Okay, super. Sylvie, I heard I'm not alone who has sometimes the problems with the fermentation. And are there things you can say to help people who goes to a restaurant and they receive some dishes with fermentation or drink with fermentation and they blow up? But is something you can do to make that you are not reacting like this?
It's a big thing. The first thing, if you realize that you are bloating like this, and it's quite painful for some people, the first thing is to take charcoal, vegetable charcoal, le charbon actif.
Okay.
It absorbs all the gases. Or clay also can be very interesting. Again, it's vegetal. And clay is earth, and the activated charcoal is made generally from coconut bark, coconut nut.
Mm-hmm.
And it has a power of absorption of if you take 1 spoon, it can be on all your intestine to absorb everything. Okay. So for some very sensitive people, it can be like a cure. Okay. If after the restaurant they really are in a bad shape. The issue is, like I said before, nowadays people are very, by the modern food and so on, they got very disbalanced microbiota. Mm-hmm. And when you bring good bacteria by lacto-fermented product, it's new to the body sometimes, and it can trigger reactions like elimination, detoxification, because this lactic acid bacteria, the lactic acid and so on, and all the byproducts, they can neutralize heavy metals, they can neutralize pesticides, and so on. So it change, it make reaction in your body. So I follow René in his way of doing like small hints of lacto-fermented product, because if you do, if you are not accustomed and you go to a restaurant and you eat only this, you can have problems after.
Yeah.
And it's also a combination, for example, when you are sensitive, if you are sensitive with the gut. For example, if you eat topinambour, Jerusalem artichoke, which is hyper rich in inulin, the sugar, then without lacto-fermentation, you explode already in your belly. So it's combination of sugars from the fruit and vegetables and the fermentations. So it's not only lacto-fermentation, but it also the vegetable itself or the fruit itself. It's called FODMAP. It's fermentable oligodisaccharid maltitol and polyols. It's the sugars of vegetables and cereals and fruits. Mm-hmm. So it's all this.
Yeah, it's a really interesting world, and there's so much to learn about it. That's clear. And Aaron, what can you suggest to a chef who will start with fermentating products? What he has to do first? What is the first step to do?
I think it's if you've never done any fermenting, first of all, like to relax a little bit, because like all of these very smart people are saying, don't like start inundating fermentation to every single aspect of what you're doing, because people are going to explode and feel bad. One thing I've noticed, since we're a vegan restaurant too, I think that one thing that I see is like people, they get into their mind, they're like, I don't feel well, I want to be healthy, so I'm going to go to this vegan restaurant and I'm going to eat a giant kale salad with tons of and a kombucha and a kefir, and then they feel, and they're like, oh, this sucks, I feel horrible. And it's like, because you're not used to it, you've been eating fast food for like 20 years, and then you go straight into eating fermented foods and things. So making sure to like not go too crazy, like even though we're called fermenter and we have a little aspect of fermentation and everything we do, to not to just blast people, right? But as far as starting a project, I'd say one of the easiest ones obviously is to do lactic acid bacteria fermentation of, like, I don't know, sauerkraut or something like that. Is so simple. I think that the important thing to remember is to not worry about a recipe, but in creating the conditions for fermentation that are ideal for that fermentation. So it depends on what your goals are, and to create the conditions for that. Fermentation has always existed. It was not an invention of human beings. This is an observation of human beings. And so they were able to observe it existing in its natural state. And then we've said, oh, let's create a vessel and let's put it in this place, and then we can kind of guide and steer it, right? So to be able to make something simple like lactic acid bacteria fermentation and do experimentation, see what it's like when you ferment in one spot of your kitchen versus another, with this much salt or that much salt. And so we do everything pretty standard, 2% salt by weight, with and we ferment everything in stoneware or in glass or stainless steel. I don't know if that's a consideration for everybody, or we have a concern about fermenting in plastics because of the high acidity. And so I would suggest, personally, I don't know, maybe, Sylvie, you would know better if that's like an actual problem, or if fermenting in plastic is okay, but our customers seem to appreciate that we don't. So, yeah, that's what I don't know if I just said anything. I don't know if I answered you.
Yeah, Sylvie, do you have
Well, there is no heating in fermentation. So the plastic particles shouldn't go into the product. It's more a question of acidity. It goes to pH 4. So I don't think it's a big problem.
Most of our pH is 3.4 around for lab ferments, and there has been some discussion and concern about whether fermenting in plastic, if it leaches, even for the polycarbonate. But again, I'm not a scientist. I do, so I don't know. But there is a perception in the marketplace.
Yes.
So I have to listen to that too.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. So I have a question for Sylvester. Do you think there's a real future for the technique fermentation?
Of course, because we already use it for so long. It's just the way we look to fermentation is different than a couple of years ago, and it keeps on changing. And not there are a lot of new techniques considering the fermentation, but we just go see how do they do it. For example, in Asia, how do they do it in Africa? How do they do it in America? And we just share the intel. And I think by sharing all the intel from everybody, it just increased the way you look personally to fermentation. Of course, there is a future, but what considers me a little bit is that everybody who is into fermentation really needs to know, because we spoke already that it's all over in gastronomy, but there's also another level of Horeca who wants to start with the fermentation, but we have to keep in mind that we're actually dealing with a living product. So it's not always going good. And sometimes it goes bad with everybody. I think they already had some things that were not like, all right, this is not what I want. But knowing that, you have to have the knowledge of when it's good and when it's bad. So I think for sure there has to be a nice platform for information, for sharing information for those who want to start with it, that they really don't serve bad things into their restaurant. But first time you fermentate, you don't know actually what to expect, and then you maybe think it's good, but it's not good, and you will serve it to the guests. So I think that there's still a lot of progress we can make also for the future. To young chefs who's doing in school, I don't know if really there's a focus in hotelier schools on fermentation, but I think we can increase the level there also as well. So for sure there is a future, but it's just the way we look at it and the way we respect the product and we respect the way of fermentating. And for sure,
thank you. It's logic, and that's the reason why I want to do this debate, because I think that it's going very fast with this technique, and a lot of people don't know it. And it's important because we are talking about food and health, and when it's going wrong, that can give a lot of problems. I have a last question, and then and I will ask it to everybody. We'll do a little tour about it, and it's clear that the fermentation hype is now full. But my question is, what will be the next hype in the kitchen for you? Sam?
Yes, it's not an easy question, because we used to work every day in a kitchen and to imagine for tomorrow. But I think the next for me will be probably human, because we have an impact on every techniques in the world, and we have an impact on products. Human, for me, I told for many years, human is the center of everything. You can have a nice techniques, it's human. You can have a nice product, it becomes really nice because there is a human behind. Yes, we have a focus on this, and probably human is the second part of sustainability.
Okay, thank you. René, Mario?
La prochaine étape, je pense que c'est, comme Stan l'a dit, hein, c'est certain qu'aujourd'hui, même dans les équipes, il va falloir qu'on travaille sur l'humain, beaucoup plus de respect. Donc on est déjà dans le respect des produits, etc., mais le respect de l'humain, le respect de notre environnement surtout. Et je pense que oui, pour le futur, c'est peut-être ce sera peut-être moins technique, et on va peut-être retourner aux sources, peut-être sur des choses beaucoup plus simples, ou redécouvrir des choses qu'on ne connaît pas ou qui sont méconnues. Je crois fort en ça, parce qu'on est très proche de notre environnement, donc on voit tout ce qu'on peut y trouver. Je pense que demain, pour moi, c'est là qu'il y a un avenir.
So this says he agrees with San that the future, the next step is like we've looked at a lot of things, but the human is central in the process as well, and it's very important. And not just the human, but also the environment around you, the ecology is very important. And his advice is that that this is going to be the very next thing. For myself, I think also we're talking about fermentation, we're talking about other things, but actually they're all very old techniques. So it's just an old technique that exists already, that we technically and scientifically will develop a bit more and to refine it. So maybe next thing is smoking. I don't know, it could be, but it's all old stuff. It's nothing new.
Peut-être vivre de peu, mais vivre mieux.
And René's sentence is living from a little bit, but living better.
Okay. Thank you. Aaron?
I would say the next big thing for us is to scale up vegetable charcuterie to using koji, and being able to have it produced at such a scale that we can use it as like a deli for like doing deli meats.
Okay.
So that's something that we've been practicing and working on, is taking vegetables and going through like a series of different fermentations. I think that's also another thing that we're going to see a lot more of, is people using multiple techniques of fermentation. So for example, we're working on things where we do a lactic acid bacteria fermentation, and then applying Aspergillus oryzae to that and seeing how that and making new products. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Sylvester, do you have something to?
Yeah, next hype. I don't know actually if it's a hype, but it's already busy. That the big problem on world scale is just the climate change, and I think it will also reflect into the Horeca, meaning we started already 10 years ago with a short chain, buying local and things like that, and I think that vision will only reflect more and more into kitchen. Yes, like every chef is saying now, go back to the roots, don't look too far, don't try to reinvent yourself by doing things really that is not your style of kitchen. So I think staying focused on yes, what we are doing in the restaurant is like short chain, and things we are doing is like healthy cooking. I think that will be only more in the future, and I think a lot of more restaurants just will follow that trend for first.
Okay, thank you so much, Sylvie. You have the last word. From
first and
the
last.
scientific way, what
I will be like, as I'm not a chef, so my dream as a consumer that goes to restaurants would have to be to go to because apart from René that I know of course in Voorlinster, to go to a restaurant where you feel good, you feel humanly well, and when you feel that you eat something that makes you feel good, that makes you dream, and that respect, in fact, all your environment, so local, without pesticides, and even to go a bit forward, that is takes into account your health state.
Mm-hmm.
We are going little into this, but it's only in gastronomy.
Yeah, that's true.
For everyday life, I don't find any restaurant that provide me this. It's only very like smarter chef that takes effort to think further. But in everyday life, when you want to go to restaurant, it's so rare to find organic food and a simple, well cooked, and in a good manner and good spirit. So I hope we can develop more this.
Yeah, a lot of work to do, huh? So I want to thank you all to be with us together and talk about this not only hype but fantastic technique that is fermentation. I hope really, Aaron, that they will control the fires over there in Portland, and that it will be very fast normal air in that you will have, because you have to stay inside for the moment. Not only COVID, but also this is making your life very difficult, I understand. So thank you so much, my friends, and I hope to see you soon. And we will now make that this video and this debate will come on Facebook and on YouTube via Smart TV. And so you can see it also if you want. Thank you so much. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.